Hi, this is Matt from the Cook's Warehouse. I'm our resident knife geek and I'm doing a series of videos on knives this week. And so for our first video, I thought I would talk about the different types of knives and give you an introduction to what each one is good for, the jobs that you can do with each knife, and the types of knives that you should have in your kitchen. So I want to walk you through a little introduction of the different types of knives that I have here in front of me. And I'm going to start with the most important knife. By far the most important knife in your kitchen is this knife right here, which is a chef's knife. This is the knife that's going to be responsible for probably 90% of all the work that you do in your kitchen. These are a great multi-purpose knife. This is what you're going to reach for almost all the time. And in fact, if you're buying new knives, I recommend that most of your budget go towards your chef's knife, and you should get the highest quality chef's knife that you can afford within your budget. I'm going to go down the list of other knives that are more specialized. So first up is this knife, which is a serrated knife, which we commonly call a bread knife because that's primarily what it's used for. I also see people use these for tomatoes quite a bit. And the reason why is because these serrations are really nice for cutting into things that are easily crushed. So the serrations help the knife to bite in without crushing the food. So this is why it's excellent for slicing bread. It's also good for tomatoes. However, I'm a firm believer that if you keep your chef's knife in good condition and you keep your chef's knife nice and sharp, you should be able to slice a tomato without a serrated knife. So I primarily use mine for bread. We have this knife, which is a paring knife. Now this is going to be your go-to knife for fine detailed work. So if you're cutting up fruit into decorative patterns, if you're cutting decorative patterns in fondant or pie crust or pie dough, something like that, this is the knife that you're going to reach for. And these knives are mainly designed to be used in the hand. So you can see compared to a chef's knife, which has this deep belly to it, a paring knife is almost completely straight. And that's so that you're not necessarily cutting on a board, you're more so cutting in your hand and doing detailed work with this paring knife. We have a fillet knife. Now a fillet knife is excellent if you are a fisherman or if you work with a lot of meat. So this knife has a special feature that none of these other knives have, and this knife is actually designed to be flexible. So you can see that the metal actually bends. And that's a great thing, especially when you're working with fish, because if you've ever deboned a fish, you want to get as much of the fillet as possible and get as close to the bone as possible. And this knife, because it's able to bend, you can lay your fish on the counter and you can actually bend the knife to run right along the spine of the fish so you're not wasting any meat. This is also an excellent tool for trimming whole cuts of meat. So I bought a whole tenderloin back a few months ago, and this was an excellent tool for trimming the silver skin off the tenderloin because it can actually slip right under the silver skin and run along the meat. So you're not wasting any meat, you're just taking the membrane off. So if you cook a lot of meat or fish, I would say that one of these knives is a really great tool to have at home. We have a Santoku knife. So just like their Western chef's knife, this is another all-purpose knife. This is meant to be an all-arounder in the kitchen. It's meant to do just about any kitchen task that you have on hand. The difference is that some people prefer this style of knife over a traditional Western chef's knife. And the reason why is because it has a different blade profile. So it has a more blunt tip, which we call a sheep's foot tip. So you can see that compared to a chef's knife, it's less pointy on the tip. And what that gives you is it gives you a flatter blade profile. So you can see the sharp part of the edge runs almost completely flat along the bottom of the knife. So this is more of a Japanese style of blade, and in Japanese cooking, the most common type of cutting is push cutting instead of rock cutting. So instead of setting your knife down and rocking it on the board, you're mostly going to be picking your knife up and pushing it. So because this is so flat, it makes the most amount of contact with the board as you're push cutting. So depending on your style in the kitchen and what you prefer, you may prefer this to a German chef's knife. However, these are going to do basically the same job as a Western chef's knife. It's just a matter of which one you prefer. This is what we call a utility knife or a petty knife. So this knife sits right between a paring knife and a chef's knife in terms of its size and in terms of the blade profile. So a lot of prep cooks, when they're doing lots and lots of onions or lots and lots of peppers, some prefer a utility knife or a petty knife to a chef's knife. So these are basically going to do the same type of job. This is just a little bit smaller blade and a little bit more agile. So if you find that you like cutting onions or cutting produce with a smaller knife, you may want to invest in a petty knife or a utility knife. And the last knife that I have on hand here is a carving knife. And this is the knife that you're going to pull out for those special occasions when you're cutting a ham, you're cutting a turkey. And the defining feature is that, as you can see, this is a really long knife. So if you're cutting a big cut of meat, like a whole turkey breast, something like that, and you want to get nice continuous slices without having to move your knife around, this is going to be the knife for you, because you can cut all the way along a large cut of meat without multiple cuts. So that's just a few of the types of knives. This is the most common types of knives that we sell here. If you outfit your kitchen with a good set of knives, you're going to be ready to face any task that you might find in the kitchen. So in our next video, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the different styles of chef's knife, because the chef's knife is the most important knife in the kitchen. So I'll see you next time.